Hello everybody, welcome to the day. Education. Certainly can't go by a day without hearing something about or talking about education, whether it's our educational system in the United States, throughout the world, whether it is what people are learning in the workplace, are teaching in the workplace, also a form of education, or simply just personal connections and conversations that we have with other people. You may hear comments and contexts such as, wow, they're so articulate. Wow, they really speak well. They have a reservoir of information and knowledge that comes through in the way that they interact and converse with others. All those relate to the type of education we have. Our hope is that we come across and we portray ourselves as an educated person. What is an educated person and what is education? What's the value of education? We may know the economic value of education, as we'll find in one of the statistics today, that the average person that has a college degree makes about $1.80, close to $2 to every dollar that a person who doesn't have a college degree is. So there's great value in having a college education, but the value is so much more than just economic. There's a societal, political aspects associated with education. Those who are educated are better able to insert themselves in so many different areas and walks of life. It's really an exciting adventure to go through the educational system, but it's even more interesting to see what people do with the education they receive. Here, we're going to talk a bit, actually step back and try to get an understanding of what education is. We're going to offer a lot of definitions so that people who leave this presentation have a good understanding of how they would define education, both from a professional and also a personal aspect, but even more importantly, to look at aspects like degrees. What is a degree? From a baccalaureate degree to master's to a doctorate. And then we'll look at what the difference between a bachelor's and a master's degree. Many probably couldn't tell you the difference between a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And I think there's some that even teach in universities and colleges that may not have a solid understanding of the differences, or even what the purpose of education is. I often ask when I do seminars and conferences, what's the purpose of education? Why do we go to a school to become educated, and we go to school with other people to try to understand certain concepts, to try to understand society or cultures? What is the purpose? We'll get to that. Hopefully, the perspective and opinion that I give you about education will give you one to consider, and then you can come up with your own. In fact, that's the role of education to a certain degree, which is to provide a level of knowledge to a community. But then that community takes that knowledge and does something with it. I remember somebody asked Margaret Thatcher one time, will you ever stop from changing the world? And she goes, I really can't change the world. I can only lay out the issues for others to decide. That's in some ways what education is. We hope that when we go on CNN or Fox News or NBC, ABC, any news organization, any organization that has as its purpose to provide some knowledge and information to their citizens, to a country, to the world, we hope that as we receive and then interpret that information, we do so wisely, and we rely upon the education that we've received in order to transfer that information from the way we received it to the way we actually use it. And we do so in an enlightened manner. We don't believe everything that we hear, see, but we take that information and then do some analysis with it. And after that analysis, then we make a more, what we would say, educated or even learner type of decision. So we'll start with saying, what is education? First, a literal definition. It comes from Latin. It should not be surprising that so much of what we've learned in terms of language starts as late Latin. Latin was one of the oldest, if not the oldest, language in existence. Latin has defined education as to bring out or to lead out. It's defined as bringing out and leading out our capacity for life. So what does that mean, bringing out or leading out our capacity for life? In some ways, it means that the greater capacity relies upon the education that you receive. I often like to think that education gives you possibilities. You often don't know about the possibilities until you have some form of education. We're not necessarily saying that that education has to be within a classroom, but we receive educations through so many different forms. Of course, it starts in the classrooms, but we also receive educations from our parents, families, friends. Religion could provide some of that educations. So we take these educations that we receive, and it gives us an understanding of the way in which the world operates. And once we have that understanding, then we're aware of, as I said earlier, the possibilities. But unless you know what's possible, it's often hard to do what's possible. So by exposing ourselves in life to the great possibilities that life has to offer, then at somewhere along the line we're going to be able to say, that's what I want to do. I've now seen what I want to do. I often tell the story. My son was a huge NASCAR fan, and I actually thought it was quite boring, to be honest with you, watching on TV. And he goes, I want to really go to a NASCAR race. So we went to a NASCAR race. Went to the one that was very close to our home. It was one of the most exhilarating experiences I've ever been in. And as a result, for the next 4, 5, 6 years, maybe longer, we traveled around the country in the summer to go to NASCAR races. We went to Pennsylvania. We went to Tennessee. We went down to the South. There were several, Talladega. And I fell in love with the NASCAR culture in that it's fast and exciting, and you're sitting in stands with 100,000 people who are very nice and generous people, all watching this excitement that really doesn't relate as well on television as it does in person. And it really taught me a lesson, very much like what I said a couple of minutes ago, which is you don't know what's possible until you can see what's possible. Once you saw how exciting NASCAR could be, then we started to gain an interest in it. Same thing happened with my daughter. We went to New York one summer, and she really didn't want to go, but while we were there, we went to see a show, which was Mary Poppins. She fell in love with that show. She was quite small. I think for the next 7, 8 years, wherever we went on travels in the summer, we would always either start or end up in New York so that we could see Mary Poppins. It ran for quite some time. Absolutely loved that show. And what's interesting is somebody who did not want to go to New York in the beginning actually fell in love with the city because she saw Mary Poppins. Had she not seen what was possible, she would not have been able to do what is possible. That's what education does. It offers you life's possibilities. And we extend those possibilities in university. Most people, I would say way over 90%. I ask almost every class I teach, what does university mean? Most people don't know, but it's really quite simplistic, right? It comes from the word universe. Again, it reinforces this aspect of possibilities. Here, the thought is that we are going to expose you to the possibilities in life, what we call the breadth and the depth that our world has to offer. When we look at universities, we often think of, especially the older universities, they're built where there's a bunch of buildings around what's called a quad, or a huge grass space. The idea was that students and faculty alike would sit in this quad or big open space, and they would debate life's chances, life's choices, life's consequences. And the hope is, by interacting with so many throughout the course of your university career, that you'll solidify in your mind who you are and where you want to go, what you want to be. And that's the intention of creating physically that type of university. So it is intended to, this universe aspect is to broaden your perception, your perspective, and also your mind. I remember when I went to college, and the first couple of years we called it breadth at the time, and I had to take a zoology class, and I had no interest in zoology. I had to take a geology class, had no interest in geology. But what I did know is, after taking those classes, I definitely don't want to do that. But then there was other aspects where I took classes. I thought, that would be so fascinating, interesting. I had to take a drama class. Again, this exposure to as many possibilities as exist in our world was the intention of your first couple of years of going to a university. And once you were exposed to the possibilities, then the hope is after 2 years, you'd pick a discipline, which we called a major, that worked for you, that you were passionate about, that you wanted to spend your life pursuing because of your passion. But certainly within college, the hope that once you identify your passion, you would take the remaining 2 years within that discipline, within that major. And at the end, you'd get a degree. Degree is another term that goes back hundreds of years, comes from medieval times, and it actually means a title or a rank that's conferred by a college. And it signifies that you have attained a certain step or grade in your area of learning. So it means that, and this is what's so interesting about a degree. Some people say it's a piece of paper. I don't want to go to school just to get a piece of paper. You're not going just to get a piece of paper. It's what that piece of paper signifies. So if you were to go to an interview and they wanted to know what your education was, you could say, I have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a doctoral degree, and they have a good understanding. The person you're interviewing has a good understanding of what that represents. They may have one themselves. Anybody who has a bachelor's degree understands the rigor that one has to complete prior to being awarded a degree. So they have a good concept of the knowledge that you may have. Without having that degree, it's hard to signify the level of knowledge that you have. Yes, you may have taken a number of classes, but it doesn't culminate with what we call a title, a rank. And that's the great value of having a degree. It signifies a body of knowledge that you've attained. What are those bodies of knowledge? There's basically 3, and we'll start with the bachelor's degree. Bachelor's degree, again, comes from Latin, and it means novice or pupil. I often tell people when you go into a baccalaureate program, the assumption by the faculty or teacher is that the person doesn't have much knowledge within that discipline. We need to raise the level of knowledge that a person has within that discipline. That's one reason why we typically have more tests within the baccalaureate degree than we do others, because the assumption again is that this person may not understand this discipline, may not have a keen understanding of the principal components that make up this discipline. So we're going to assume that they're a novice or a pupil, and our job as a faculty member in the baccalaureate program or undergraduate program is to provide a level of knowledge to this student so that they better understand the discipline which they've chosen to spend several years researching and studying. We often learn in the baccalaureate program what they call the trivium. It's one of my favorite terms. Rhetoric, logic, and grammar is what we learn. Rhetoric, logic, and grammar. Rhetoric deals with, the debates. Logic determines with your analysis, how you interpret and analyze and apply information. It's quite important. Grammar, of course, deals with the way that we express what we've learned. So many of those courses that we take in the undergraduate baccalaureate program are related around this trivium. And hopefully if we do well and we've enjoyed our time as the baccalaureate, or if we feel that in order to attain some level of understanding within the discipline, but also to secure future appointments within a discipline, we may believe we have to go forward and get a master's degree. A master's degree assumes within a certain discipline that you have a good understanding of that discipline. The master's degree then, the intent then, is for somebody to study exclusively within a certain period or place in that discipline. The MBA is a degree we'll talk about in a second, but our hope is here that we have mastered the discipline within a specific discipline. For instance, sociology is a specific discipline. Psychology, zoology, geology. We use the word ology In education, that means the study of. Geology, study of rocks. Sociology, study of society. We may get an undergraduate degree in a broad area, for instance, business. But then for our master's degree, we may want to concentrate on a certain area of discipline and master all knowledges and learning within that discipline. A master's in finance, a master in marketing. The hope is when we come out of a graduate degree, when we've graduated, then we could actually showcase our skills as a recognized expert within that discipline. That's the hope. That's the hope of a master's degree. In fact, it means chief or leader. So you should be able to lead discussions, understandings about a certain discipline, if that is where your master's degree comes from. If you get a master's degree in marketing, the assumption is that you know all tenets, facets, theories of marketing. You certainly don't know finance to that degree, but you should be an expert in marketing. It's always interesting to know that the very first master's degree was in the 12th century. Amazing. University of Paris was the one that offered it. Takes us to the doctoral degree. Here we mean teacher. The Latin term for doctor is a teacher. So we move from novice to leader to actually teacher. So you are teaching that discipline to a host of other individuals who are hoping to either learn that discipline or master that discipline. It signifies, and this is the most critical aspect of a doctoral degree, is original research. So much when we look at the assignments that are completed within the undergraduate and graduate, it is, let's go get a reference, let's put the reference in our paper, and then let's expand upon or interpret the information that we've obtained. A doctoral degree is maybe not completely different, but the focus certainly is. And that is, we understand the theories of the past, but how have they changed today? How would you apply them differently? Using the information which we call research that you've obtained in your studies. How would you modify that research to make it more applicable and timely in today's dramatically different work environment? That's what we look for in a doctoral degree. In fact, when we look at the differences between a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, we'll talk a little bit more about how a doctoral degree relates to these aspects. A bachelor's degree is really concerned with the consumption of knowledge. We talked about a bachelor's degree and somebody going to undergraduate education is that they're a novice. That's what it means. So they don't have a good understanding of the discipline. So we need to spend more of our time talking about what I'll call the foundational knowledges of a discipline. It's not just the theories of motivation, but what motivation is. When we move into the master's program, and also even more heavily in the doctoral program, there's that appreciation, as I mentioned earlier, that a person clearly understands the concepts and theories associated with the discipline. However, they may not completely understand the totality of information within the master's degree. We're going to relay that to you. But also we want you to critically think and assess, and most importantly in the master's program, apply what you've learned. The aspect of education that becomes critical is theories work in principle. They may not work in reality. We need to modify and adapt what we've learned to the circumstances of a situation. There's that great quote I use quite a bit, is that the fight changes with the first punch. And that's a boxing term, which means you can study and strategize as much as you can. But once you get in the ring and the first punch is shown, you have to be able to adapt. And so that's what we want to do in education. That's the value of a master's degree. It takes the theories that we've learned in the undergraduate program, and it applies them to the workplace. It applies them because certain aspects of individuals change the way in which we would utilize theories in a specific organization. Teams, conflict, motivation, compensation, all of those terms have an impact with how successful a strategy is going to be determined within an organization. So in a master's degree, we understand that you have this knowledge, but we want you to apply the knowledge and take into account all these other factors that affect the implementation of a strategy within the organization. There's a limited knowledge that's going to be gained in a wide array of subjects when you go into a bachelor's program. But as we mentioned, a master's program has a focus, an extensive focus on one singular area. I'm going to get a master's in history. That's all I'm going to study is history. I'm not going to be studying English or public presentations or finance. I'm going to be studying only history. And the last aspect that differentiates a bachelor's degree from a master's degree is that we tend to be much more led as a student in a bachelor's program. It's much more of a lecture student, lecture hearing type of approach, where you have what's called a sage on the stage, a person who stays in front of the class as a lecturer and imparts information. As a master's degree, it seems to be more collegial, more collaborative. So you have a faculty and student that interact in a way that appear to be searching for the best answer, the right answer. Yes, the faculty member has the greatest of knowledges. Obviously, that's why they are the faculty member, the teacher, and in imparting that knowledge on the student. But since we have to take into account this other aspects that we were talking about, which was the variances of the marketplace, where you take a theory and have to apply it in such a wider range of organizations as the post office and Google completely operate in a different manner. So if you cannot apply the same philosophy, concept within both organizations and expect the same outcome. But what you can do is take into account your organization, your culture, as you implement a strategy or a theory, and be ready, willing, and able to adopt that theory based on the type of work environment that you see. So those are what we would define a degree, an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, and even a doctoral degree. There's the differences between a bachelor's and a master's program. And that leads us to the value, at least economically, in terms of education. And there's some statistics that illuminate the value, the economic value of education. Some colleges adds up to 25% to your earnings, just some. In 1960, quite interesting, 10% of California adults were college graduates. Today, about 30% of California adults are college graduates. And 30% of jobs will be gone within 10 years. So that tells you that when we look at jobs of the future, having a college degree is going to be central to be able to obtaining and retaining those positions. And part of that is why we're seeing a larger schism between those who went to college and those who didn't go to college, especially in terms of compensation. Those who have a high school degree typically receive about $26,000 a year, but if you have a bachelor's, you're receiving about $46,000, almost double. The average salary of a person who has a master's degree is $72,000. I always tell people, there's so many statistics I can use. One is 80% of people who are millionaires in the United States made it on their own. And so I tell people, it's not who you were born to, it's what you were born with. So if you were born with certain skills and abilities, that is going to determine whether you're going to be economically successful, more so than who you were born to. Same here. If people want to know, I want to be wealthy or I want to have a comfortable life, this statistic is very difficult to debate. That you can make 3 times more with a master's degree than just with a high school graduation certificate. I mentioned about how much more those with a bachelor's degree make versus those with a master's degree. And those who have a master's degree earn about $2.50 for every dollar a high school graduate earns. But I would be remiss leaving you with this presentation thinking that what I hope for you is that you obtain some degree so that you can have some economic security. I think education, and what I spent so much of my time is, education is so much more than that. I've looked at what the purpose of education is and what the hope of education is, and the key differences between the two come down to one word: participate and contribute. The purpose of education is really to develop one's knowledge and skills so that they can participate, so they pay their taxes and do their and obtain a job so that they can garner some income and support themselves and wouldn't have to rely on anyone else. So to provide certain knowledges and skills so that people can be a participant. The hope, though, is much more idealistic. It's that through education we not only participate, but we learn to contribute. We learn to contribute those unique talents and those unique skills to the betterment of others. That doesn't mean that we don't make money or even lots of money, but it means that we have an understanding that along the way we have to give something back. There's nothing wrong in principle with making a lot of money. What's wrong is if you don't feel that, or if you don't feel that, you need to at least give something back. Not all of it, for sure, but you have to help others who may not have been as fortunate, whether that's financially, materially, intellectually, that may not have been as fortunate. And two other purposes that I would say. I came up with this saying that says, educate the mind and you better the person, educate the soul and you better the world. I spend a considerable amount of my time today, and have for the last 25 years, in understanding and appreciating the value of education. Of knowing that an educated person has so many more possibilities in life. But also with this understanding that you have to do something with what you have. That's what this saying is. So yes, educate the mind as a student, and you can better that person. But if you educate their heart, their soul, then you have a chance to better the world. You have a chance of producing an enlightened person who can change the very direction in which our world flows. To change the very direction upon which many are moving towards. One final comment. The primary deliverable or skill that one learns through education is the ability to become a more moral, spiritual, intellectual, and philosophical person who can then make this knowledge, who can use this knowledge to make the right decision at the right time and for the right reasons. Moral is a sense of right and wrong. Spiritual is a belief that you have to do something for other people. Intellectual is to have the mind capacity. And philosophical is a love of wisdom, to be a wise person. All of those, hopefully, are aspects that are illuminated in education. And as a result of your educations, then you can make the right decision at the right time and for the right reason. Can you imagine, as a society, if we lived amongst people who make the right decision at the right time and for the right reason? So when someone says the primary deliverable of education, certainly we can say that our hope is that we educate the mind so we better the individual, but that we also educate the soul or the heart so that we can better the world. And along the way, we want to use the types of ethical, moral, spiritual, philosophical, intellectual gifts that we receive from education so that we can make better decisions in our lives and for the lives of those who come after us. With that, everybody, enjoy the day.